How's it going, everyone? It's Jake here with the CRE Founders Podcast. I'm here with Max, who is currently a board member at Centrifuge, but was also the co-founder and CEO a few years back. So, Max, can you tell us a little bit about what it was like founding Centrifuge?
Sure. Hi, Jake. Thanks for having me. Yeah, it's been a while since we founded Centrifuge. I think the idea came out 2016. So what is that? That's 7 years ago.
Wow.
Um, and so then Philip, Martin, Lucas, and myself kicked it off in the summer of 2017. And it was the ICO craze. So a little bit the tail end of the ICO craziness. But we decided purposely not to do an ICO and then went more traditionally and raised a seed round, a classical seed round from pretty classical investors in 2017. The initial vision was not quite where Centrifuge is today. So initially, we want to just build a global commerce network where every company and every business can exchange data and business information, pay each other, send invoices, order stuff. That was our idea. And with the goal of eventually financing those transactions. And at one point, we just took a shortcut and thought, screw it, we don't have to bring that all on chain yet. That will be our uphill battle. Let's start with the financing and bridge it from the real world. And that's when the theme of real world assets came without having the name yet.
Makes sense. Makes sense. So, how'd you meet all your co-founders? That sounds like a big co-founding team.
That is, and we always had similar sized teams. When I say always, so there was Centrifuge was our fifth company for most of us, our fifth project. Well, it started as a company, so I can say company. We founded four companies before with pretty much the same founding team. Lucas came maybe slightly later, but in essence, the same founding team coming from B2B and then fintech. And the fintech that we just founded before was in a similar space. It was invoice financing. It's a company called Taulia that just recently got sold to SAP, one of the large software companies here in Europe. And Taulia, the company we co-founded before Centrifuge, as I said, did already invoice financing just in a Web2 way. So we financed the transaction between a large corporation and their thousands of suppliers. And so we thought, well, can we bring that shit on chain and do it at scale, do it cheaper, do it smarter, do it more inclusive? So yeah, that was the initial idea.
I see. And what was the inspiration to want to bring all these assets on chain? Because it seems like you were doing it pretty well off chain. Why'd you want to?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, initially we only thought about invoices because that's what we knew, right? So that's what we did for the 10 years before in this fintech. We financed invoices. So let's bring invoices on chain. But your question is valid. So why the heck would we bring those invoices on chain? Works quite well off chain in the good old world. Well, it didn't. So that's the answer. It was a lot of operation work. It didn't scale. It scaled linearly, not exponentially. It was a lot of manual work, a lot of permission stuff. Whenever we financed someone, it was a network play. We could always finance suppliers that were part of a supplying organization to a large corporation. So there were limitations that we hit. There were limitations as well geographically that we didn't like, where a supplier needed to be in a certain country. So we thought there's better ways, permissionless ways of doing that. That was on the financing side of the house. And on the building side of the house, so all the companies that we built before, we built them often on top of an existing ecosystem. Very often this was SAP, the big software company, where we just built software on top of SAP, which was nice because we could tap into the SAP data, suck the data out, and do beautiful things with it, like financing invoices. That was great until it wasn't, when then the ecosystem owner, SAP in our case, decided, let's change the rules a little bit. Let's make it more expensive. Let's disable the API for that use case, and so on and so forth. So that was annoying. And when I just learned the first time about something like Ethereum, in I think it was 2016, you can build actually and run software on a permissionless supercomputer that nobody can stop. I knew that is actually ideal for those things. I built something, and the middleman, the ecosystem owner, the SAPs, the Salesforce, the Twitters of the world cannot just pull the rug and disable the access. So that was on the technical side, more a driver. Why Web3?
Makes sense. So your frustrations with the traditional system kind of inspired you to
Yeah,
build a system for the next generation. which is really interesting. Um, so, what was the first technology you built at Centrifuge? Right, like I know you guys built up quite a sizable tech stack. Where'd you start off with?
Yeah, so it was an Ethereum play from the beginning. Um, and the very first thing is we built our own nodes that were we thought will be running at the different buyer and supplier sides, or at partners that could host it, and that then would host the data that is exchanged on chain, where we put a hash on chain and the data is exchanged between the nodes. That was our initial prototype that we showed our investors as well. Like really the nodes with the data, and then putting a hash in, and I'm simplifying things, it was more complex, but a hash on Ethereum on the ledger that was pointing to the data that was locally stored. So that was our first prototype version that we spent quite a year or two with trying to tinker around and find users. And as I said, it was pretty hard. And so at one point we decided, let's just focus on the financing part, bring those assets on chain and finance those. And then started with invoices and we realized, okay, since we do that with invoices, we can do that with any kind of real world asset. And then we did music royalties and many, many other asset types, as you know.
I see. So, can you tell us a little bit about some of those early pools?
Sure. So I do believe one of the first pools was actually with a company called Paper Chain. It's a pretty weird name for a company that actually did financing of music royalties. So if I was an artist, I typically wait, I think 180 days or so. If my song plays, get 180 days later, I get the royalties from Spotify or from Apple Music. I have the data though. I know my song was played. I know that. And I know that Apple or Spotify or whatever, they will pay me. So it's actually a perfect financing scenario where it's very, very, very secure that the money will flow 180 days later, just not now. So that was our first pool, a rather small one. I don't remember, a few $100,000. Then we did some invoice financing, obviously, freight invoices. And then relatively soon, we launched our first pool with a company called New Silver for upper fixer mortgages. And so the first pool was successful. Then a few years ago, we had the first pool with New Silver integrated into Maker, where Maker took the senior debt, or parts of it at least. And now I think the pool is just about to be increased to a sizable double-digit millions. I don't know exactly the size of the New Silver mortgage pool, but yeah, that was one of the first ones, one of the earlier ones.
Yeah. So, how closely did you work with New Silver on developing the pool?
So I myself didn't, but the team pretty close to, because it was one of the first ones to help understand what needs to be done to set it up, to onboard New Silver, to onboard the assets. I don't know how it is these days. I mean, it was the beginning of the product, so I'm sure it was pretty clunky and painful for both parties. I'm sure that should have been changed and adjusted, and is very likely much better now. But I'm not in the weeds.
Very cool. So, you're new, I guess. So that was kind of you're on the board member, kind of more or less, kind of a former life to an extent. Can you tell us a little bit about your current endeavor, Crane Earth, and what you're looking for?
Sure. So I left Centrifuge. I was a little bit burned out in right before COVID actually, and want to do some other things, which I then did the last few years. I invested. I'm started as an angel investor. Did some consulting, advising roles in some projects I'm passionate about. So very different things. And then about 9 months ago, together with one of my co-founders of Centrifuge and the other companies, Philip Stillig, we decided that we want to formalize some of the investment activity that we did as angels. Specifically, one area, the area which is mostly known as refi or regenerative finance. And real world assets play actually a role in that space. What is regenerative finance? Well, different definitions, but to keep it simple, it's where Web3 meets climate, where we use Web3 technology to bring Web3 cryptonomics, token economics, crypto incentives to scale climate projects. That's what we want to invest in. And there was a natural link to Centrifuge actually, because one of the later pools about a year and a half ago was with a company called Flow Carbon, where we tokenized carbon forwards and brought them on chain. And this is the area that I thought, oh, that sounds super interesting. I want to spend some more time there. And that's what we do right now. We invest in projects in that space, in this regenerative finance space.
I see. So sorry to backtrack a little bit, but I did kind of want to make sure that we covered this. What do you mean by on chain? When you say on chain, what do you mean by that?
In what on chain? On chain for real world assets, or on chain for climate projects?
Oh, sorry. Give me a second. Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
Did
no
you say
worries.
something?
Yeah, I didn't understand the on chain question.
Oh, okay. So by on chain, what do you mean by bringing assets on chain?
Oh, I mean, creating a digital representation of an asset on the blockchain, Ethereum or Polkadot now these days, as an NFT in our case. So every asset that we bring on is minted as an NFT and then pooled together in the Tin Lake pools, or in general the Centrifuge pools. But that's what I mean with bringing it on chain. And there's a legal aspect of that as well, where before the asset can be brought on chain or in parallel, it got to be pooled in an SPV. So there's a legal framework that puts the asset, the invoice, the mortgage, the carbon forward into a certain legal structure, puts it there, and then you tokenize it, create an NFT out of it, which then exists on chain and can be traded, can be used for whatever.
Okay, very cool. Did you build that technology yourself? The
We
NFT
did, yeah.
technology?
Yes, we built all the NFT stuff, all the Centrifuge stuff, except, and even that one I'm not sure anymore, except for KYC, where we use a partner. Most of the stuff we build in house, and definitely the tokenization aspect. Yes,
Yeah, I know with the Tin Lake pool, you guys use securitized to do
that's right.
KYC AML. Yeah.
That's
Oh,
right. That's right.
yeah. Very cool. So do you have any companies you're excited about that you invested in on the climate tech side?
Yeah, several. I mean, look, one of the first deals that we did as Crane Earth is not necessarily in the climate area, but it's a foundational technology that we feel will be used in the climate space. And it's somewhat similar to Centrifuge, actually. It's called Fence.finance. And Fence is bringing debt facilities on chain. So if you have a borrower and a lender and a funder, so it is to create a debt facility in the Web2, in the TradFi world. It's incredibly expensive. The setup cost, the ongoing cost is just horrendous. So what Fence is doing is removing all the complications, put it on chain, nice UI on top. So for the two parties to have it easy and abstracted from crypto, but use smart contracts, Web3 in the back end to optimize the efficiency. And that gets the costs down 90%. So where Goldman Sachs or whoever you want to pick charges $1 million, or let's say $500,000 to set up a debt facility, you can do that of a fraction of the cost with Fence. And ongoing cost the same. And it has a real-time visibility in your debt facilities for reporting purposes and many other benefits. So those are the first deals that we did as Crane Earth. Pretty excited about it. Other deals are in the carbon space, where we work with a company called Atem. That's a German word for breathe or breathing. Atem.earth. They provide an API to access carbon credits. So if I'm a corporation or a marketplace and I want to access carbon credits in a programmatical way, I can use their API. And the spin here is that they source the carbon credits that they deliver through this API, either as carbon credits or as retirements. They source them as Web3 credits. So those that are already brought on chain, those carbon credits, that's what they will deliver. And obviously there's a bet that we take as Crane Earth and Atem that carbon credits will go on chain as a whole. And that's our bet here. Similar to DeFi, where the long-term bet is for decentralized finance that the financial system will completely go on chain, or completely. For the most part, for the important parts, it's probably a 10, 15 years plan to get there. I think in the carbon world, there's a similar bet. I personally think it will be much faster because there is just nothing in the carbon world. There is no technology. There is no few 100-year-old financial system. There is not a billion bank accounts in the carbon world. So things will go faster. That's our bet in the carbon markets.
Okay, makes sense. So do you have anything, does that have to do with ESG as well?
Well, I don't like the ESG letters, but at the end of the day, everything is related to at least to the E of ESG. So yeah, I mean, if I'm a corporation and I want to fulfill my environmental commitments and goals, then I use Atom to access carbon credits. I use Senken to trade them. It's another investment of us. Another E or maybe the S of ESG. Again, I don't like them, but there's a biodiversity company that we invested in where the company measures the abundance of biodiversity in a certain piece of land or in a water pond, and corporates measure that to justify their actions. I'm a mining company. I'm not completely destroying the planet. I'm a water company like Nestle or Unilever, and I can verify that the sources where I get the water from are not getting worse by my actions. Things like that. And there's a Web3 angle as well in the back end.
Very cool. Max, thank you so much for your time.
Sure, happy to.
Yep. Okay.